Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slash Film Daily for September 28th, 2017. On today's show, we'll be taking a look at some Venom casting. Deadly Class, the comic book, is coming to Syfy channel by way of the Russo brothers. We're going to be talking about Apple's foray into original programming for television. We'll be talking about Hocus Pocus 2 and the Avatar sequels, which are now in production. With me on today's show are Slash Film writers Ben Pearson.
Hey, what's up?
And Chris Evangelista.
Hello.
Let's get into the news, because there's actually some news to talk about today. Venom had some casting announced, or it's not casting announced. I guess they are looking at Michelle Williams to star opposite of Tom Hardy in the Venom movie. So she hasn't been officially signed on yet. She's in talks. But this is kind of surprising because I didn't expect someone of her caliber to want to be involved in a comic book movie. If you look at Michelle Williams, her filmography, the list, it's almost all... early in her career, she did some stuff like Lassie and a Halloween movie, and then she did, Dawson's Creek. And then after that, she made almost all exclusively interesting decisions. The only movie that I think is probably the standout, blockbuster movie is the Oz the Great and Powerful, and I think she signed on to that because of Sam Raimi. So it's interesting that she would be interested in this production. Chris, what do you think of Michelle Williams possibly being involved in a Spider-Man less Spideyverse movie?
It's definitely surprising. I can only guess that either it has a really good script or she really wants a really good paycheck. Those are my two guesses onto why she's interested in doing this, because it's true. It doesn't seem like the typical film for her. Or maybe she just wants to do something different. Maybe she wants she's so tired of doing, very serious indie films. She wants to maybe stretch herself and do something fun and, comic booky for a change.
Yeah, and this film also has some other A-list talent. Has Emmy award-winning actor Riz Ahmed. Zombieland director Ruben Fleischer is the one directing it. He hasn't had a hit, I think, since Zombieland. I don't know. It's just very interesting. You can read HT's full article on this on slashfilm.com, and we'll be following this because I am so interested and baffled by this, Sony's decision to go forward with this, Spider-Man less Spider-Verse, and Spider-Man less Venom movie sounds horrible to me, but it seems like they're making all the right decisions thus far, so we'll have to see. Another comic book property is coming to the small screen, and that is Deadly Class. It has earned a Syfy pilot coming from the Russo brothers, the directors of the Avengers movies, or Avengers sequels, it should be said. Chris, you wrote the article for slashfilm.com. What do we know?
Yeah, so this is based on the Image comic series Deadly Class, where it's set in the most brutal high school on Earth, where the world's top crime families send the next generation of assassins to be trained, which sounds kind of interesting. Kind of sounds like a battle royale in a way. I mean, I haven't read the comics, so I don't know that much about it, but Syfy is pretty much, for their 25th anniversary, they've sort of rebooted themselves, and they're trying to sign on more and more TV series. Like they just greenlit a George R.R. Martin series, and they have Krypton, the Superman. I guess it's about Superman's grandparents this time. That series.
Yeah, it's set on Krypton.
Right.
What is Deadly Class about? Do we know?
It's like I said, it's set in this high school where crime families send their children to be trained to be assassins, and it's the THR story. It came from it reports it's about a disillusioned teen recruited into a storied high school for assassins, maintaining his moral code while surviving a ruthless curriculum. Vicious social cliques and his own adolescent uncertainties may prove fatal. And it's set against the backdrop of the 80s culture.
I have read the first couple issues of this comic a long time ago, whenever it first came out, and I remember enjoying it, and I actually have a couple of the trades waiting to be read, but like everything else, I don't have the time. But I remember thinking while I was reading it, I was like, this could make a good television series. I could definitely see it as a Syfy or CW show, and Syfy, I guess, makes sense, especially with them doing, like, you know, the magicians and all that kind of stuff. Let's move on, though, to another company making original TV program. Apple is setting their sights on Steven Spielberg, Reese Witherspoon, and more. Ben, you wrote the article for SlashFilm.com. What do we know?
So right now, Apple is sort of testing the waters as far as original television programming. They haven't fully jumped in yet, and we don't even really know what an Apple original television show is going to look like or how it's going to be distributed yet. But Apple hired a couple of former Sony employees to basically lead their content acquisitions team. And these employees, Zach Van Amberg and Jamie Ehrlicht, are going all around Hollywood and taking meetings with all sorts of people and looking for the next big Game of Thrones, Breaking Bad, The Crown type of show. They apparently were very close to locking down that One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest prequel show, Ratchet, which we talked about a little while ago, from Ryan Murphy, but that one ended up going to Netflix. But as of right now, Apple has bid on a modern version of Steven Spielberg's Amazing Stories, which was an anthology series that he created that ran on NBC from 1985 to 1987.
Have you ever seen that show?
No, I haven't. Have you?
It was very good. I think it's available on DVD, probably available on iTunes and stuff, so I would highly recommend it to anybody who has not seen it.
Yeah, taking a look at the list of talent that he managed to get at the time, just the director list alone is insane. He's got Scorsese and Joe Dante and Bob Balaban, Irvin Kershner, Robert Zemeckis, Tobe Hooper. I mean, it's like a who's who of people who were, you know, up and coming and established directors at that time. So I was saying that, yeah, if Apple were able to get an anthology series like this early on in their run, in their TV, you know, trying to make a big splash in the TV landscape, it would be a good way for them to recruit similarly high-profile talent to come over just, you know, to direct one episode, and it wouldn't be too much of a time commitment for people. So that would be cool.
I do have a question. Do you think an anthology series can work in today's, you know, world? Like, you know, the TV market has changed. It's all about serialized, not episodic stories. And, you know, M. Night notoriously couldn't get Tales from the Crypt off the ground as a reboot. So I'm just wondering, do you think anthology stories, like, have a place on today's television?
I think so. I think Black Mirror sort of proves that it's possible and able to thrive. And that's another good example of a show that has been able to recruit big name talent, that time in front of the camera. You know, they've got a bunch of great actors, John Hamm and Donald Gleason, and a ton of different people to come and, you know, just star in one episode, basically. And I think partially maybe that sort of splintered attention span might actually help anthology series in the long run, because you don't have to devote that much time. You can just sort of check in here and there and, like, have it as your, you know, third or fourth option as something that you're watching regularly, and you don't really have to it's not necessarily must-see, like, appointment television, but you know, I think there's definitely a place for it.
For some reason, Black Mirror completely slipped my mind when I asked that question. But I don't know. I was kind of thinking, like, wouldn't it be interesting if, you know, the new anthology television idea is to do seasons, like kind of like they do with American Horror Story, where, like, this, you know, Amazing Stories might not be each episode is directed by a different person, but each season is a different story. Do you know what I mean? I guess they're already doing that, so that's not a new idea. But
that would be cool, though.
What else is Apple considering?
Yeah, so the only other project that they have confirmed to have bid on right now is a partnership between Reese Witherspoon and Jennifer Aniston. They are going to reunite on TV for the first time since they played sisters, I believe, on Friends back in the day. And they are working on a show about TV morning shows. And there's not really a ton of information about that show that's out there as of yet, but like it doesn't have a title, for example. But that would be, for Apple, I think, a big coup, locking down two major stars in a show, especially with Reese Witherspoon sort of having a lot of heat coming off of Big Little Lies recently. So yeah, I'll keep you guys posted with Apple's movement in this territory.
I just think it's so odd. I just don't see Apple being able to position themselves as a, creator of original TV programming on the same level that Netflix and Amazon are doing.
Yeah, this piece from Hollywood Reporter says that a lot of the producers and people who are like putting these packages together, these TV packages that could potentially go out to different networks and stuff, are already looking at Apple sort of being on the same level as HBO and Netflix, just because of the pedigree of what they've done in the tech space. So I think people just, they know the name brand and they recognize that Apple is not going to. I think a big part of it too is that you mentioned earlier, Peter, in a previous episode of the show, how much capital, how much cash Apple as a company has. I think it's like $260 billion or something.
Yeah.
So I think right now the estimates are they're looking at spending at least $1 billion for their first year of original programming. So these producers and stuff are looking to, get involved with that as quickly as possible.
They don't just buy Netflix at this point. They have enough money to do it, and it would not even hurt their pocketbook. They would still have enough money left over to be one of the richest companies out there. I don't know. What the follow the story. A movie sequel that we never thought would happen might happen. Hocus Pocus 2 is developing. Chris, you're at the story for Slashfilm.com. What do we know?
Yeah, so Mick Garris, who co-wrote the original film, he's also directed a lot of Stephen King direct-for-TV adaptations. He did like the TV version of The Shining. He did an interview with Forbes, and the question came up basically, for years fans have wanted a sequel to this movie. Is it ever going to happen? And according to him, it is happening, and he's heard rumors that they're developing a script, and it'll probably be on TV, probably for the Disney Channel or ABC. And that's what he says. So we'll see. I mean, there's always been rumors about this. The cast have talked about it over the years, and for a while they were saying basically as much as they want it to happen, it probably isn't happening. But Mick Garris says it is.
Yeah. I mean, this is the latest in the, that 90s nostalgia boom hitting us. We had Power Rangers, Ninja Turtles. It's interesting, Disney World has had a show in the last couple of years that their Halloween events starring the three sisters from the Hocus Pocus movies. So it seems like there is an increased interest in seeing a sequel. I almost think that they should do a theatrical event. I think TV is a bit small. I think there's a lot of people who were kids during the 90s that are now adults with kids that would take their kids to see in Hocus Pocus, legacy equal in theaters. But onto another sequel. The Avatar sequels are finally in production, and they have revealed the first look at Jake and Neytiri's kids. Ben, you wrote this article for Slash Film. What do we know about Jake and Neytiri's kids?
So we know that the Sully family has grown by 3 since we last checked in with them in 2009's Avatar. It seems crazy that Avatar came out in 2009, just thinking about like how long ago that was and how long it's going to be until we see the new one, which I think Avatar 2 comes out in 2020. So that's a huge gap. But yes, so Jake and Neytiri, the Na'vi lovers have birthed 3 children. So there's a firstborn son, a secondborn son, and a youngest daughter. Entertainment Weekly and Fox have sort of released the names of the actors who are going to be playing these kids. I'm not going to go through them because you're not going to recognize any of their names because they haven't really been in much before. They've released the names of the characters that they're going to be playing, and they all are like Neytiri. Like the son is named Neytiri. One of the other sons.
Don't worry, Ben. You don't have to read these names.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
You can go to slashfilm.com and find out these names. And we've been told for a long time by James Cameron that this was going to be more of a story about their family. These photos look very much... If you told me this photo, I think someone tweeted at me, that this looks like a Disney Channel stock photo from the 1990s.
Yeah.
And that's what it looks like to me. I mean, they're standing in Avatar Land in Disney World, but... yes.
And obviously they're going to look way different. We have a couple pictures of the kids in this article that you can check out, but they're going to look way different. They're going to be, fully CG'd motion capture performances. And I was talking with HT about this offline. Like, she was sort of lamenting the fact that these kids, feeling bad for them that they were going to be, forced to do this motion capture stuff so early on in their careers. And I was sort of commiserating with that idea with her. And then I was like, oh, well, maybe it'll actually be like good training for them moving forward, because motion capture is going to be, it's only going to become more prevalent in the coming years. So maybe they'll become more employable by being in these movies this early.
And Chris, you did a story on the Avatar sequels yesterday that got a lot of flack. Had the headline, "Those Avatar sequels you're not looking forward to will cost over $1 billion to make."
Yes.
I think the headline's obviously in all fun.
Right.
It's not... I mean, there was a lot of people that thought it was overly cynical for a slash film, but I thought it wasn't fun. But what did we learn about the price tag of the Avatar sequels?
Right, so James Cameron, he's not just shooting one Avatar sequel, he's shooting 4, and he's shooting them all at once, basically. It's one huge production. That's how he's talking about it. So instead of just shooting one and then the other, he's thinking of it as one big film in a way. But
kind of like how they shot the Hobbit trilogy, which was originally 2 films. But usually you do this kind of thing to save money.
Right. And in this case, that's not the case, where it's going to cost over $1 billion. And that's just a rough estimate. I mean, there's always a chance that the production could drag on longer than intended. I mean, it's shocking that we're even here now, because they've been talking about starting these films for a long time now. So it just seems like the nature of how Cameron is working on these films just seems like there's a chance it will go over schedule, it will go over budget, so it might end up, ballooning over $1 billion. Who knows? And that's a lot of money. So.
Every time you say that, I just picture Austin Powers or Dr. Evil from Austin Powers, and this is a comical SNL skit that somehow has become reality, guys.
Yes.
I also do not believe that we're ever going to see these Avatar sequels. I don't care that they're in production. I don't care that we're seeing pictures of these kids. I just don't believe it's happening. But I'll believe it's happening when I actually am in the theater in 2020.
Year? 2020. Yeah.
Who knows if we'll even be alive in 2020?
Yes.
Well, that's it for the film news. Let's get to the mailbag. Every day on the podcast, we try to answer a question sent in from you, the listeners. You can send your questions to peter@slashfilm.com. Please mention your name and general geographic location in case we mention them on the air. Today, Amy from New York City asks, are there films that you enjoyed or understood more after a second viewing? Thanks. I'll start this one off. There's a film I've mentioned previously on the podcast, and it's a film that came out at the 2004 Sundance Film Festival. It's a film called Primer, and it's a time travel movie drama. Yeah, indie time travel drama. And I don't think anybody probably has seen this film one time and understood it. I probably have seen it, I want to say 6 or 7 times at this point, and I'm not quite sure I have a grasp of it completely. But every single time I see it, it does make that experience more rewarding, and I do feel like I do understand it more. It has a lot of timelines going on and a lot of very complicated things. It almost feels like a movie that was created by a mathematician or something, and it's awesome. I really admire the film a lot. It's a film that was made for I think like $12,000 or something, and it was shot on film. Not in the hundreds of thousands, but the near $10,000 range, I think. Have either of you seen Primer?
Yes.
Yes, I have too, and I'm in the same boat where it probably took me 6 or 7 times. I think I just rewatched it a year ago, and when I rewatched it this year ago for the 7th time, it was like, oh, I finally get what this movie's about. It took me a few years, but everything finally clicked into place.
We make this sound so bad because you have to see it 6 times before you'll get it. But I highly recommend it, and it's a film I like to show people, which is probably why I've seen it 6 or 7 times. And I'm not a person that I don't consider myself a dumb moviegoer. Like, you see these infographics diagramming how Inception is working, and I'm like, does someone not understand how Inception works? It seemed very clear to me how Inception works, or how Interstellar works, or all this stuff. But Primer is very much a head scratcher in that respect. Ben, how about one of yours?
So I'm going to go with The Fountain, Darren Aronofsky's movie. This one is one that I liked when I first saw it, but I think it hit me on a much more emotional plateau the second time, and in all subsequent viewings I've really sort of fallen in love with this movie. It's actually the number 11 choice on my favorite movies of all time list that I wrote for slashfilm.com, so you can check that out there. This movie is all about death and forgiveness and the sort of meditation on loss that Hugh Jackman's character has to go through. Rachel Weisz plays his wife, and there are multiple time periods. It spans millennia. It's a very complicated movie, and it's a lot to sort of process the first time. But once you sort of get on its wavelength, the visuals are so breathtaking, and I think Hugh Jackman delivers one of the best performances that he's ever done in his entire career. And I think all of that sort of comes together, and when it does finally click, it's a really, really special movie. So that's one that I know a lot of people have seen once and just sort of disconnected from, and just sort of walked away going like, I don't really know about that movie. But I think I would encourage people, if you've only seen it once or if you've never seen it at all, definitely check it out and maybe give it a rewatch, because I think it rewards multiple viewings.
Definitely. I think there's a lot of greatness there, but I think every time I watch it, I think, like, what could have been with the Brad Pitt version that was, twice the budget that was originally supposed to shoot. And because I feel like there's some great ideas there that feel constrained by the budget at times.
One of those great what-if moments.
Yeah. Chris, how about you?
So I feel like this is like a generic pick. We're going to do it anyway, where it's Kubrick's 2001, where I saw this film when I was very young, because, it's that one film that everyone says, oh, you got to see it. If you love movies, you got to see this. And so, I saw this when I was young, probably even before I was a teenager. And I didn't know what I was even seeing. I just sat there and I was like, it's like, what is this movie? Like, there's long stretches where, there's almost no dialogue at all. And as a kid, that was like mind blowing to me. I was like, are there movies like this where people don't say anything for long stretches of time? And, over the years, I would keep trying to revisit it. And, even in my teenage years, I was just sort of like, I don't get this. And then as I got older, I always appreciated the artistry on display, but I never sort of got it. And then I watched it. The older I got, the more I started to just realize what a remarkable movie it is. Not just, on the artistic level, just overall, just this very huge, sweeping story that's literally spanning, millions of years. And and now it's pretty much one of my favorite films. But when I first saw it, I didn't know what was going on.
Yeah. I think it would be hard for any kid to sit through a movie of that length and with that the speed of it, and it's very methodical and very, it's beautiful. But as a kid, I don't think I connected with that. This is definitely one I agree with you on. For my second pick, I'm going to put Chris Nolan's The Prestige. This is a film that obviously has a big twist to it. It's a movie about magic and magicians in decades ago, and I'm not going to spoil anything, but it is a little complex, like any Chris Nolan film, because it's it's doing some time shifting. It's doing some interesting things of what it's showing you and what it isn't. And when I first saw it, I saw it at a press screening in San Francisco. As a person who, is a magic hobbyist, now a member of the Magic Castle, I was huge into magic. I was kind of like confused by it, seeing it the first time and not sure if I liked it. Now it's definitely probably in my top 25 films of all time. I have, prints of it up on my walls. So it's definitely been one of those films that I think rewards more viewings than just once.
Definitely. Yeah, I just watched it again for the first time in probably 5 or 6 years, and I had forgotten some of just how intricate some of the plotting was. And I feel like I knew that movie really well around the time that it came out, but because I haven't watched it in so many years, I watched it again. I was like, wait, now how exactly is this working? And so it's one of those that if you put a few years in between viewings, it might require a little bit of work. But I think I like the movie because of that even more.
And the other thing that should be said about it, from a magician's perspective, this movie really nails it, because almost every great magic trick or every great illusion requires so much more work than anybody would ever anticipate someone going through to do. Mm-hmm. And I think some of the points of the story are going through the elaborate process that a magician will go to fool people. And I think it's a great movie. Ben, what's your next pick?
So I wanted to quickly mention The Sixth Sense, just because I feel like we would get a ton of emails and stuff like, oh, why didn't you guys mention The Sixth Sense? That one's like a very obvious choice, but it's also a very good choice for a movie that definitely gives you a better sense of it the second time around, and you get to understand more of what M. Night Shyamalan was doing with colors and just exactly, the dedication and sort of details that he put into setting this up, and the way that he cuts into certain scenes right at a moment where you sort of fill the rest in with your mind on your first time, and then the second time you understand the reality of what's going on. So that one is a really great film. But the second one that I really wanted to talk about was Anchorman, and that I don't really have too much to say about that other than I love that movie now, and maybe actually that movie, since the sequel came out, has sort of I feel like the sequel has actually lowered my thoughts of the original a little bit, just because I didn't really love the sequel that much. But I was a huge Anchorman fan for a long time, and I still love that movie. I have a print of it on my wall as well. But that's one that I didn't quite connect to the first time I saw it. That came out in the same summer as Dodgeball in 2004, and I remember loving Dodgeball way more than Anchorman at the time. But on rewatches, the ratio has shifted or whatever. Like I definitely go back to Anchorman far more, and I think it's a much more ridiculous sort of self-assured movie than Dodgeball. So it was like a rivalry in my mind, and Anchorman has definitely come out on top, but it's taken a few viewings to do that for me.
Yeah, well, Anchorman is definitely a movie that is insanely quotable. I think when that came out, for the next few years, all my friends were just quoting every other line from that movie. And I want to say about The Sixth Sense is that's a movie that you almost have to see twice in the theater when it came out, because then you're like, oh, how was Bruce Willis at the table with his wife? I need to, how did that, and it's almost like you have to, you go back, and I remember seeing it a second time the next night, just to kind of piece together, how that change, how that twist at the end of the movie impacts the whole story. Chris, how about your last movie?
All right, so my last pick is Rosemary's Baby. I'm a big horror fan. I was always a big horror fan, and that was one of those movies, again, sort of like 2001, where people were like, if you love horror, you got to watch this movie. And so I saw that. I can't remember how old I was when I saw it, but I saw it. And it's not that I didn't get it as much as I just didn't care for it. I was like, I don't see what the big deal is about this. This isn't for me. And over the years, I sort of just avoided it. And I would just hear again and again people just saying, you gotta, Rosemary's Baby, it's one of the best horror movies ever made. So I finally gave it another chance a few years ago. And I don't know if I just wasn't paying attention the first time or I was just, again, too young to get it all. But watching it, again, giving it a second chance, it was like a whole new experience for me. And I just appreciated it on a completely different level, on how subtle it is and how it's just slowly becomes more and more unnerving as the film goes on. And I don't know, I just appreciated it so much more the second time I saw it.
For all our picks for the movies that we enjoyed more on the second viewings, as always, please write it to us at @/filmdaily on Twitter. Tell us what your picks for this mailbag segment were. Did we miss anything egregiously? I know we had others that didn't make the cut, but I think I feel pretty good about these 7 movies that we came to a conclusion with. As always, submit your questions, peter@slashfilm.com, mention your name, general geographic location, in case we mention them on the air. Chris, where can we find more of your work?
Cut for Film, Nerdist, /film, of course, and just look for me on Twitter. I'm out there.
And Ben, where can we find more of you?
You can find me writing every day at /film.com, and you can find me on Twitter at Ben Pears.
You can find me on Twitter at /film. You can find all the articles mentioned in this podcast on /film.com and links in the show notes. You can subscribe to this podcast, published every weekday on iTunes, Google Play, Overcast, all the popular podcast apps. Please go rate and review us on iTunes, spread the word, tell your friends, and thanks for listening.